My own parents demanded I give up my master bedroom in the house I pay for entirely. Also, my unemployed 30-year-old brother Jake and his pregnant wife Emma could have more space while living rent-free under my roof. They ambushed me at my own dinner table in my own dining room with a coordinated intervention that treated me like a selfish tenant instead of the homeowner who'd been supporting 4 adults for 8 months. The betrayal was devastating because I'd opened my home to help family in crisis, covering everyone's expenses while they contributed absolutely nothing. I pay the entire mortgage, every utility bill, all the groceries, even Jake's cell phone, $2,300 a month, keeping them comfortable while my savings account bleeds dry. But the worst part was watching them enjoy my humiliation. Jake smirked while Dad delivered the ultimatum. Emma dabbed fake tears with perfect timing, and Mom lectured me about family obligations in the house I'd worked 60-hour weeks to afford. They were treating my generosity like weakness, my kindness like stupidity, savoring every moment of putting me in my place. We're family and family shares everything, Mom said with that self-righteous tone, conveniently forgetting that I'm the only one in this family who's been sharing anything. They thought they had me trapped, that I'd never have the backbone to stand up to their emotional manipulation and kick out a pregnant woman. What they didn't know was that I'd been documenting everything. Every receipt, every bank statement, every mortgage payment, proving this is my house and my rules. They thought they could take over my bedroom, but I was about to take back my entire house. My family thought they owned me because I'd been generous, but they were about to learn the difference between kindness and weakness. To understand how 4 adults ended up living in my house rent-free while demanding I give up my bedroom, you need to know about Jake's lifelong status as the family's golden boy. At 30, my older brother had never held a steady job, never paid his own rent, and never faced a single consequence for his failures because our parents always swooped in to save him. When Jake dropped out of college, it was finding his path. When he got fired from 3 jobs in 2 years, it was bad management not appreciating his talents. When he moved back home at 25 with no savings, it was smart financial planning during tough times. Jake was the golden boy who could do no wrong even when wrong was literally all he ever did. Jake was the golden boy who could do no wrong even when wrong was literally all he ever did. The living arrangement started 8 months ago when Jake called in crisis mode about losing his apartment. He and Emma were facing eviction, they had nowhere to go, and Emma had just found out she was pregnant. Being the responsible sibling, I offered temporary help. A few weeks on my couch until they got back on their feet. But temporary help became permanent residence when my parents decided to support the young couple by moving in to help with the pregnancy. Suddenly, my 3-bedroom house was housing 5 adults, with Mom and Dad taking the guest room and Jake and Emma camping in my home office on an air mattress. Temporary help turned into permanent freeloading when my parents moved in to support Jake's latest failure. The financial reality was stark and completely one-sided. My software engineering salary covered the $2,400 monthly mortgage, $300 in utilities, $400 in groceries for 5 adults, and all the random expenses that somehow kept appearing. Jake contributed $0. Emma contributed $0. My parents contributed $0. Meanwhile, Jake spent his days playing video games and networking on social media while Emma redecorated my house with baby-themed decorations I never agreed to. My parents acted like generous grandparents-to-be, hosting dinner parties and planning nursery themes, all funded by my paycheck, while treating me like an ungrateful roommate in my own home. I pay the entire mortgage while they live rent-free and treat me like the problem for wanting basic respect in my own house. The breaking point came when Emma announced she was entering her 2nd trimester and needed proper nesting space for the baby. What should have been a happy family moment turned into a calculated campaign to guilt me out of my own bedroom, with Emma suddenly developing pregnancy complications that required more space, privacy, and comfort than my home office could provide. The timing was suspiciously convenient. Emma had been sleeping on an air mattress for months without complaints, but now that the pregnancy was showing, she suddenly needed the master bedroom with its attached bathroom and walk-in closet. The family meeting felt less like a celebration and more like a real estate negotiation where I wasn't invited to participate in the bidding. Emma's pregnancy became their excuse for everything, including taking over my bedroom. 2 days later, the coordinated attack began. Mom, Dad, Jake, and Emma cornered me in my own kitchen after dinner, presenting their demand like a united front that had clearly been rehearsed. Mom led the charge with emotional manipulation about family support and pregnant women's needs. A pregnant woman needs the master bedroom, Mom declared with that self-righteous tone she'd perfected over decades of enabling Jake. You're a single man who barely uses that space anyway. Emma needs room for baby furniture, nursing supplies, and proper rest. It's only fair. Dad backed her up with his usual authority routine, while Jake nodded along like he deserved the biggest bedroom in a house he'd never contributed a penny toward. Emma sat there looking victimized, dabbing her eyes at perfectly timed moments. A pregnant woman needs the master bedroom. Like pregnancy gave them ownership rights to my house. That's when I delivered the answer that clearly shocked them more than any response they'd prepared for. No, I said simply. My house, my bedroom, my rules. If you need more space, you're welcome to find an apartment you can afford. The silence that followed told me everything I needed to know about how they'd been planning to handle my resistance. My house, my bedroom, my rules, and their shock revealed they'd never expected me to stand up for myself. The guilt campaign launched immediately after my rejection, with all 4 family members taking shifts to wear down my resistance through coordinated emotional manipulation. Mom led the charge with daily lectures about family obligations, reminding me how disappointed she was in my selfishness and how this wasn't how she'd raised me to treat pregnant family members. "You're being cruel to a pregnant woman," became her daily refrain, delivered with the kind of disappointed maternal tone designed to make me feel like a monster. "Emma's carrying your nephew or niece, and you're prioritizing your own comfort over their health and safety. What kind of uncle does that make you?" The irony was lost on her that she was lecturing me about family responsibility while living rent-free in my house and contributing nothing to the household expenses. "You're being selfish with a pregnant woman in the house. Like my bedroom was community property instead of private space I paid for." Jake's approach was pure golden boy entitlement, acting like my refusal was a personal attack on his status as the favored son. He started making comments about how I was hoarding space in a house that was big enough for everyone if I'd just stopped being territorial about one room. "I deserve better than a guest room in my family's house," he told me during one of his entitled rants. "I'm about to be a father, and fathers need space to provide for their families. You're just one guy who doesn't even have a girlfriend. Why do you need all that space when I'm building a family?" The audacity was breathtaking. He was calling my house his family's house while contributing absolutely nothing toward making it habitable for anyone. I deserve better than a guest room in my family's house. Like being unemployed gave him ownership rights to my property. Emma perfected the art of strategic tears and convenient health concerns, suddenly developing pregnancy symptoms that specifically required master bedroom amenities. Every conversation included references to morning sickness being worse in small spaces, back pain requiring a better mattress, and stress affecting the baby's development. "The stress of this cramped room isn't good for the baby," she'd say while rubbing her belly dramatically. "My doctor says pregnant women need proper rest environments, and this tiny space is making my anxiety worse. I'm worried about what this stress is doing to your nephew." Her timing was surgical. Tears appearing exactly when I seemed most resistant, health concerns emerging whenever I mentioned them finding their own place. "The stress isn't good for the baby," weaponizing pregnancy to guilt me into surrendering my bedroom. My parents tried pulling rank with the authority they'd used throughout my childhood, treating my adult property ownership like teenage rebellion that needed correction. Dad's approach was particularly condescending, lecturing me about real men taking care of family and suggesting my reluctance showed character flaws. "As long as we're family, you need to do what's right," Dad said with that final word tone he'd always used to shut down arguments. "This isn't about property rights or who pays what. This is about character, and right now your character is being tested. Real men sacrifice for their family's welfare. As long as we're family, you need to do what's right, like family membership trumped property ownership and financial responsibility." When emotional manipulation failed to break my resolve, my family escalated to a coordinated icing out campaign designed to make me feel like an unwelcome stranger in my own house. They'd stop talking when I entered rooms, exclude me from dinner conversations, and give me cold shoulders that would make a teenager's silent treatment look mature. The psychological warfare was surprisingly effective at first. Coming home from 10-hour workdays to find 4 people pretending I didn't exist was exhausting, especially when I was the only reason they had a roof over their heads. They'd discuss household plans, baby preparations, and family activities, like I wasn't sitting 3 feet away paying for everything they were planning. They gave me the silent treatment in my own house, like I was the problem for wanting basic respect in the home I owned. The kitchen became their primary territory to claim with strategic scheduling that made it nearly impossible for me to cook or eat meals in peace. Jake and Emma would monopolize the dining table during prime dinner hours, spreading out baby magazines and laptop computers like they owned the space. When I tried to make dinner, I'd find every pot dirty, the dishwasher full of their dishes, and no clean counter space, because Emma's pregnancy cravings required elaborate meal preparations that somehow never included cleaning up afterward. They'd act like my attempts to use my own kitchen were intrusions on their domestic bliss. They tried to make me a stranger in my own kitchen, turning my dining room into their private office space. The financial exploitation reached absurd levels as they confused my refusal to give up my bedroom with permission to drain my resources everywhere else. My grocery bill skyrocketed as Emma's pregnancy cravings included expensive organic foods, specialized snacks, and premium ingredients that magically appeared on my shopping list without discussion. Jake started ordering delivery food multiple times a week, charging it to the household account I'd set up for shared expenses while contributing zero toward the mounting bills. My utilities doubled as they ran air conditioning, constantly took hour-long showers, and left lights on throughout the house like electricity was free. My grocery bill tripled while they complained about accommodations, treating my wallet like a family fund they were entitled to access. The breaking point came on a Tuesday evening when I arrived home to find them rearranging my living room furniture to optimize the space for baby preparations. They'd moved my couch, relocated my entertainment center, and covered my coffee table with baby supplies, all without asking permission or considering that I might want input on changes to my own house. "We figured you wouldn't mind," Mom said when I questioned the unauthorized redecorating. "It's not like you ever use this room anyway. We're just making the space work better for everyone." That's when I realized they'd crossed every possible boundary and would never voluntarily respect my house, my rules, or my rights as the homeowner. They saw my generosity as weakness and my property as their inheritance. That's when I realized they'd never respect my house or my rules, and it was time to make them respect my eviction notices. After months of watching my family treat my generosity like entitlement, I started gathering documentation that would end every argument about who owned what and who contributed what to this household. The mortgage papers told the clearest story. My name as sole borrower, my signature on every payment, my credit score that qualified for the loan that bought this house they were now trying to claim ownership of. Every monthly statement showed the same pattern: $2,400 automatically deducted from my checking account with zero contributions from anyone else living under my roof. The loan documents specified that I was solely responsible for all payments, maintenance, and property taxes, making me the undisputed legal owner regardless of how many people my family thought deserved bedrooms. The mortgage papers showed exactly who owns this house, and it wasn't the family demanding bedroom rights. The financial analysis was even more damning when I compiled 6 months of bank statements, grocery receipts, and utility bills. My contributions totaled $13,800 over 6 months. Mortgage, utilities, groceries, household supplies, and the random expenses that somehow kept appearing on my credit cards. Jake's financial contributions, $0.00. Emma's contributions, $0.00. My parents' contributions, $0.00. They'd been living rent-free while demanding more space, better accommodations, and priority treatment in a house they'd never contributed a penny toward maintaining. The grocery receipts alone told a story of exploitation: expensive organic foods for Emma's cravings, premium ingredients for elaborate meals I never ate, and specialty items that tripled my food budget while my family complained about the quality of free housing. 6 months of bills showed they'd contributed exactly $0 while demanding ownership rights to my bedroom. Jake's employment history made his sense of entitlement even more absurd when documented chronologically. In the past 3 years, he'd held 5 different jobs for a combined total of 8 months of actual work. His resume was a masterpiece of creative writing, listing freelance consulting and independent contractor roles that were actually unemployment periods between getting fired from retail and food service jobs. His LinkedIn profile claimed he was exploring entrepreneurship opportunities and building strategic partnerships, which translated to playing video games and posting motivational quotes while living rent-free in my house. The golden boy who deserved the master bedroom hadn't earned a paycheck longer than 6 weeks in over 2 years. Jake hadn't held a job longer than 6 weeks in 2 years, but somehow deserved the master bedroom in my house. My legal research revealed exactly what I'd suspected. As the sole property owner, I had absolute authority to determine who lived in my house and under what conditions. Tenant laws required formal eviction notices for people who'd established residency, but family members staying as guests had no legal protections if the homeowner decided their welcome had expired. The property deed mortgage documents and homeowner's insurance all listed me as the sole responsible party, giving me complete legal authority to set house rules, assign bedrooms, or require anyone to leave with proper notice. Property law was crystal clear about my rights as the sole owner of this house. That's when I made the decision that would shock my family more than my bedroom refusal had. I started drafting formal eviction notices, not because I wanted to destroy family relationships, but because they'd made it clear that respect, gratitude, and basic courtesy weren't part of their vocabulary when it came to my property and my financial contributions. The 30-day notices were professionally written, legally sound, and absolutely necessary to reclaim my house from people who'd confused my generosity with weakness. Each notice specified that their tenancy was being terminated, their occupancy was no longer welcome, and they had 1 month to find alternative housing arrangements. The eviction notices were ready, and so was I. Time to remind my family that property ownership comes with actual legal authority. Before making any moves that would permanently alter my family relationships, I consulted with a property lawyer to confirm my legal standing and understand the eviction process. The consultation was brief and decisive. As the sole property owner with documented proof of ownership and financial responsibility, I had absolute authority to terminate anyone's stay in my house with proper notice. "You're not dealing with tenant rights here," the lawyer explained. "These are family members who've been staying as guests. As long as you provide 30 days written notice, you can require them to leave for any reason or no reason at all. Property ownership gives you that authority." The lawyer confirmed I had every right to evict them, and 30 days was more courtesy than legally required. The timing of my announcement needed to maximize impact while minimizing their ability to mount effective countermeasures. Dinner would be perfect. All 4 family members present relaxed from eating the meal I'd paid for in the dining room of the house I owned. They'd be trapped at the table, unable to storm off or avoid the conversation, forced to confront the reality of their situation. I planned the reveal for Sunday dinner when they'd be most comfortable and least expecting their free ride to end abruptly. The eviction notices would be presented like legal documents. They were official, non-negotiable, and effective immediately upon delivery. Dinner would be the perfect time for truth-telling, with nowhere for them to run from reality. But my family wasn't completely oblivious to the tension in the house, and they'd started deploying desperate countermeasures that revealed how worried they were about losing their free housing arrangement. Emma's pregnancy symptoms suddenly became more severe, requiring immediate medical attention and bed rest that specifically needed the master bedroom's amenities. Jake started mentioning job interviews that were very promising and financial opportunities that would change everything within weeks, trying to buy time with vague promises about contributing to household expenses. My parents began talking about how proud they were of my generosity and maturity, laying groundwork for guilt campaigns they hoped would prevent eviction. "Emma's having complications from the stress you're causing" became their new manipulation tactic, weaponizing pregnancy health to forestall consequences. The night before my planned dinner announcement, I organized all my documentation one final time. Mortgage papers, bank statements, employment records, and legal consultation notes arranged in neat stacks that told an undeniable story about ownership, contribution, and entitlement. The eviction notices were printed on official letterhead, signed, dated, and ready to serve. My speech was mentally rehearsed but would be delivered calmly and factually, focusing on documentation rather than emotion. No matter how they reacted, tears, tantrums, guilt trips, or threats, I had legal backing and moral authority to reclaim my house from people who'd confused generosity with weakness. Everything was ready for the conversation that would end this arrangement permanently, and I felt more prepared for confrontation than I had in months. Sunday dinner started like every other meal in my house, with my family gathered around the table I'd bought eating food I'd paid for in the dining room of the house I owned entirely by myself. The atmosphere was relaxed, almost festive, as they discussed baby preparations and household plans without a care in the world about who was funding their comfortable lifestyle. I let them finish their meal before reaching under my chair and pulling out the folder that would change everything. 4 manila envelopes, each containing identical legal documents, sat on the table like unexpected dessert courses. Dinner started normally, but it would end with everything changed forever. "I have something important to discuss with everyone," I said calmly, sliding one envelope to each family member. "These are 30-day eviction notices. You have 1 month to find new living arrangements and move out of my house." The silence that followed was deafening. Dad opened his envelope first, his face going pale as he read the official letterhead and legal language. Mom's hands started shaking as she scanned the document. Jake stared at his notice like it was written in a foreign language he couldn't understand. "You have 30 days to find new living arrangements." I repeated and watched their comfortable world crumble with 5 simple words. The desperate defense began immediately, with all 4 family members launching into overlapping protests, justifications, and emotional manipulation tactics they'd clearly never expected to need. Mom started crying about family loyalty and how disappointed she was in my selfishness. Dad demanded to know how I could throw out a pregnant woman and accused me of having a heart of stone. Emma clutched her belly dramatically, claiming the stress was causing contractions and that eviction would harm the baby. Jake alternated between outrage about being kicked out of his family's house and promises about job interviews that would solve everything if I'd just give him more time. "You can't throw out a pregnant woman," Emma sobbed, weaponizing pregnancy one final time. That's when I spread my documentation across the dinner table like evidence in a courtroom. Bank statements, mortgage papers, grocery receipts, and utility bills that told the undeniable story of who owned what and who contributed what in this household. The numbers were devastating in their clarity. "These receipts show exactly who pays for everything here," I said, pointing to 6 months of financial records. $2,400 a month for mortgage, $300 for utilities, $400 for groceries, plus all the extras that somehow keep appearing on my credit cards. Your combined contribution $0 and 0 cents. The financial evidence was spread across the table like a legal brief proving beyond argument that this was my house, funded by my money with my name on every legal document. "These receipts show exactly who pays for everything here, and the numbers didn't lie like my family had been doing." Jake's golden boy meltdown was spectacular to witness, revealing just how deeply his entitlement ran when faced with consequences for the first time in his adult life. He actually stood up and started yelling about how unfair it was to evict family, how he deserved better treatment as the oldest son, and how I was being cruel to his pregnant wife. "This is my family's house, not just yours," he shouted, his face red with indignation. "I'm about to be a father, and fathers deserve respect and support from their families. You're destroying everything over a stupid bedroom when we could all live here together." The audacity was breathtaking, calling my house his family's house, while having contributed nothing toward making it habitable for anyone. "This is my family's house, not just yours," he screamed, proving he'd learned nothing about property ownership despite months of free housing. I stood up slowly, gathering my documentation with the calm authority of someone who owned everything they were sitting on, eating from, and living under. The legal papers went back into the folder, the mortgage statements were stacked neatly, and the eviction notices remained on the table as permanent reminders of reality. "My name's on the deed, the mortgage, and every bill that keeps this house running," I said with finality. "That's the only name that matters, and those signatures give me the authority to decide who lives here and under what conditions. You have 30 days. The room fell silent as the truth settled over them like a heavy blanket. All their manipulation guilt trips and entitlement meant nothing compared to legal ownership and financial responsibility. "My name's on the deed, and that's the only name that matters," I said, and walked away from their shocked silence forever. The 30 days that followed were predictably dramatic, filled with guilt trips, manipulation attempts, and increasingly desperate negotiations that all ignored the fundamental reality that I owned the house and they didn't. Jake tried promising job applications, Emma claimed medical emergencies that required staying, and my parents attempted to broker deals that somehow involved me continuing to subsidize their lifestyle. But the eviction notices were legal documents, not starting points for negotiation. On day 28, they finally accepted reality and started packing. The departure was silent, bitter, and exactly what I'd expected from people who'd confused my generosity with weakness for 8 months. They left in silence, finally understanding that property rights aren't subject to family votes or emotional manipulation. Getting my house back was like exhaling after holding my breath for months. The master bedroom stayed mine. The kitchen became functional again without constant mess and monopolization, and my grocery bills immediately dropped back to reasonable levels. The silence was peaceful instead of hostile, and I could walk through my own home without feeling like an unwelcome guest. My utility bills decreased, my stress disappeared, and my savings account started recovering from months of supporting 4 adults who'd contributed nothing but entitlement and complaints. My house was finally mine again, and the peace proved I'd made the right choice. Looking back, the most important lesson wasn't about family boundaries or property rights. It was about recognizing the difference between generosity and enabling. I'd opened my home to help family in crisis, but they'd turned my kindness into an entitlement program with demands for better accommodations in a house they'd never helped maintain. Property rights aren't negotiable even with family who think pregnancy, unemployment, or blood relations give them ownership claims to someone else's hard-earned assets. Property rights aren't negotiable even with family who think they deserve special treatment in houses they didn't buy.